At least you learn something, no, by listening to English, even if not so interested in the content. Hopefully I will be able to bring you some lessons that I learned, most of them the hard way, while leading the Delivery Hero engineering team. I did that for the past 4 years. At the moment I actually working with the Delivery Hero company, but I started a new company with them to do logistics that I'm leading now, and that's the only reason I actually left the team there. A bit about Delivery Hero. Delivery Hero is the equivalent of, in Spain, Just Eat. We are at the moment competing with them for being number one globally. I think we say we are number one, they say they are number one, it depends how you count it. But basically we grew, when I came there, was July 2011, and everybody was in the same room. There were like some 15 people. I started there as the first engineer to take over the technology. And actually we have been growing now. We are in 34 countries. We are number one in many of them. We have 2,000 employees worldwide. It's actually quite a big company. The latest valuation almost a year ago was 3 billion. And we needed to grow very, very fast, the team. And many of the lessons actually, they are common to other startups. That's the reason I wanted to share some of them today, because from what I got from Sergio last time, you are actually doing a very similar growth path in terms of engineering team. So what was our starting line? We actually did not start the software from scratch. So we got a funding team which was very entrepreneurial, very good in M&A, no idea about tech, but they managed to license some software that according to them was very good and working. Of course I panicked when I saw it. It was over 100,000 lines of code, not even one test, trillions of modules all built in Django. It was all running in one process and quite painful. Actually, no documentation, nothing. All the libraries they were using at the moment is very much not best practice. They decided to patch most of them and not contribute this patch back. So basically you could not update any library anymore. And very quickly, that's a lesson that every startup needs to learn. Only startups that fail have enough time to not work in this mode that I call fix the plane while flying. So usually software starts with engineers saying, we want to build this, it will be very nice, we will use these practices like test-driven development, whatnot. And then some business people have an idea, they want to test it out, they want to build an MVP. And they say, okay, just go, you go a bit faster, deadline is approaching, you forget your best practices, you launch. It almost happens at every point in every project. But you end up with software that very quickly you call legacy. And it's very important to understand that as an engineer, it's very difficult to overcome that. When I was developing, I hated it. But normally, you need to understand that for business, it's more important to prove if a hypothesis is correct and start with the growth, which takes a lot of time, than start having the best software. Best software gives you an edge, and not such an edge as 6 months in advance. So usually this is something you need to get going, and also together figure out what is the degree of friction, what is the degree of flying, how quickly you want to fly a new product, whatever you're doing. And it's also important for management people to understand that while you're flying, you need to get back to fix the plane. So it cannot work that you say, okay, we launch with an MVP, it's a piece of shit, but let's launch it anyway. And then you say, okay, that was so amazing, let's just add features to it. Unfortunately not, it was a piece of shit. So there needs to be some time as well, and some processes internally for looking backwards and saying, where do we need to fix our plane? And this is all ongoing. The most important thing I learned there, I think it's probably something you will quickly learn here, if not already, is you need to build autonomous teams. And they need to be very cohesive. It's the same principle as in architecture. You want components that are very independent, like really tightly, very decoupled in between them, but tightly coupled inside. So you want teams actually that people are not interchangeable. No? That's like a management dream. We have a new project, we put people again. We have a new project, we put 10 resources, no? Like project management thinking. We put 5 resources, we put 10 resources. That doesn't work like that in IT. In my experience, you work with teams of people that trust each other, people that know how to work with each other, people that have good team dynamics. And they are, as a unit, you can allocate it to almost anything, but as a unit. And this is one important concept when you grow, and then you need to make them autonomous. That was, for me as well, a big learning. There is a limit to the big room where everybody talks, visits each other, and so on. You need to give some teams a bit of room, physical room, and also room in terms of time. So they develop their own style. They develop their own practices. If you say we are all going to do Scrum the same way, all from Tuesday, all this time, all of these hours, it's impossible, because by the whole nature of an agile philosophy, every team develops in some way, and you need to give them this room. And it's very important as a management structure to figure out what is the framework, which things are fixed, and which things are teams allowed to play with. And we did many experiments here. I ended up very happy with things I learned from just watching the teams. So we had teams that actually it was always horror to do the planning for them, and they decided to invent the concept they call brunning, which is breakfast and planning. And then every time somebody was coming late to the meeting, they would put in some money, they would collect the money, and then with it they would actually pay for some planning, and they would do together the team the planning at the same time that they were changing the stories and actually having breakfast. And it was fantastic. And it's a typical thing that never could have come from me, from management perspective, because it's not like a company policy. It's something that just evolves. There is another problem, I don't know if you have here or not, which is distributed teams. As soon as teams start being in different continents, in different places, you need to also figure out what's the best framework so everybody communicates. Also, if you have home office or not, or if we had at the beginning the RQA team was in Belarus, which was very cheap and very bad idea. And we had horrific problems trying to get the QA people to actually agree with what the rest of the team was going to do, because of course if somebody in Minsk that had no clue what he's doing, no interest, and not such a high level of English. So this is very important on how to set up the team. Then within the team you need a good team dynamics, and this usually will be the job of the deep engineering a lot to make sure that this happens. Sometimes it's a team lead, it depends how you're configured, but very often it's an agile team, it doesn't even have a team lead. I don't know what the case is here, we didn't have team leads. We established a different structure, actually, I'll comment later, like a matrix organization. So within the team, some things that were really key for me was, number one, recruiting, and then onboarding. For us, recruiting was very important. I usually try that the whole team would as well interview. So normally, and I do it now in the new company I've set up, whenever we want to hire somebody, we bring them for a day to be with the team, from the morning till the afternoon. And then there are a couple of things like either pair programming sessions, small ones, he goes for lunch with the team, he sees the daily and so on. And then with that you can assess, everybody can assess, do I want to work with this person? Because even if you have the best talent, if the rest of the team doesn't want to work with him, it's going to be a disaster. So the team will stop working, the new person won't adapt, and so on. So that for us was actually quite important to get it in a structured way, because normally you want to grow very fast, and then at the beginning it's like, okay, whatever, now I talk to the person, I like him, I put him in a team. That used to be our initial setup and process. But then you quickly realize it's actually more important to let teams be, again, very autonomous, and for that they need to see if they accept somebody or not. Another thing that we were doing there that helped me a lot was to structure things from a human resources perspective. Like at the beginning, people come, people go, they have different policies, they have different ways of working. Some people want to be freelancers, some people want to work remote. Some people are used to things like salary negotiation as well. We had regulated, for example. That's more for management, but something we decided is salary negotiation will happen once a year and only at that moment. And if somebody would come over, which in Berlin, where our company is, happens a lot, say, I got a better offer in this company. We'll say, okay, just take it if you want. Otherwise, here July is your next year, so we will talk in July. If you think you're worth more, if you prove it, then let's have a discussion. And everybody knew how to discuss things and when to discuss which things. So we had twice a year organized review, which is a 360 review, which is another very good practice where not only the manager decides on the feedback of the person, but basically the whole team or a set of peers give feedback. This is the reason for calling it 360 degrees. And then you get feedback. If you are, for example, like a middle-level manager, you get feedback from your team, from similar managers, and from people on top. And with that, everybody can have a very accurate picture of where you are at. Independently of, you eliminate a lot of politics of the type of, yeah, this person hates me, or I'm a good friend of that person, so I might get a promotion. In the end, all this feedback is collected, and actually collected by Human Resources Department, So there is no way that even your manager can trick it. And in addition to that, I had something that I really recommend. It was my favorite thing, which is a monthly one-on-one that is reverse. So normally a one-on-one in a job environment is something like the manager comes and gives you feedback. More often than not, he does it because he's very busy. He does it only when you do something wrong. So normally when you call somebody and say, let's have a one-on-one, tomorrow is not a good thing to hear. So what we established is a monthly one-on-one, and it's compulsory for the managers to do. So I forced myself, and everybody that was reporting to me was forced to do that with their teams, is you get half an hour of a coffee with your boss, so to say, and then the time is for you. So is the employee the one that puts the agenda? So he can decide to use this half an hour or this 1 hour, depending on what the company allocates, for whatever he thinks it should be taught. So often it's things like, okay, how am I doing? That's really often question when people ask for feedback, but it's different feedback if you ask proactively. Sometimes people would share like family circumstances. Now people would say, yeah, by the way, you know what, my dad is sick, and actually I was thinking, what can we do? And this is something that would normally never come otherwise, because it's very difficult for a person, and more often even in IT, to step up and talk to the manager and comment something personal that might be relevant. But for manager, this is vital information, because if you know somebody, whatever, it could be that he just split up with his partner. But then you know, in an informal situation, actually these meetings usually I do it with a coffee, very often outside the office, and then everybody can talk. And then also people can ask managers there, like in more personal questions as well, questions about, I get a lot of questions about the vision of the company, or some features, why the hell are we doing this shit? Now, this is also common, once you grow fast, why are we doing this shit? I mean, really, and then it could not have been asked, or sometimes you ask your manager within a planning situation, and he doesn't even know or react, but that way you force him a bit, to give you a more personal answer. It's also for managers very different if you talk one-on-one with somebody, a bit offline, than if you speak in front of 30 people or some official communication. So sometimes you trust somebody and you build a relationship, or they ask you, why was this shit done? And then you say, actually it was a shit. I fully agree, don't say. But because of that, and that was the reason. And then you see that the person is afterwards also more committed. It's a bit of building bridges in the organization. And together with that, on this topic, very important is the onboarding. And this also depends on the team as well. So it's very good to have a mentor in the team, and it's very good to tell the team, please make sure this person is happy. The first week of somebody, the first day is the most important day usually. Because that's the day where you don't know the company, and then you get to know the company. And if that person comes, just gets a laptop, stop where to sit, and people from the team don't introduce themselves, or people from the team go for lunch and forget him, or there are like some groups of people that always go for coffee together, and you are new. This is very complex, and the more diversity you have, the more important this is. So I see you have some girls here, that's already very good. And probably you have very few foreigners. In Berlin, usually my team has 15 people, 12 nationalities. So very often, you will do things that are offensive for somebody. So it's very important that people get from first day a sense of trust and community, because they might not be the ones approaching. You are new from a new country, you don't know anybody, English is not your mother language. So that's actually very important, almost in any environment. So speaking about techniques for management, it's very important to delegate. It's very difficult to delegate, and it's not natural. Delegation is super complicated. So usually what happens, it happened to me, I promoted the best engineers, the one that wanted to do a bit of management. Very quickly I realized none of them have delegated ever anything, and they didn't know how to do. So you need to learn. And the only way is to go through somebody that knows how to do it and teaches you. Like in the process of delegation, usually what I saw is people delegate. It's not very clear. When you ask somebody to do something, you're a bit shy. Usually, just got to the position. It used to be your college before. You say, maybe we should do that. And it happens like that. And then the other person didn't, or you say, oh, let's do that. You should do it. Okay. But you didn't explain how. You didn't explain when. You didn't explain why. And then you didn't explain how would you check. And then the person will do it wrong, which almost always will happen. And then you don't know how to tell that person that did something wrong. because you didn't know how to delegate in the first place, and it's very offensive and very difficult first time you need to go to somebody and give negative feedback and say, by the way, this task I expected something completely different. Again, how do you do it in a way that after that meeting the person is happy and says, wow, my manager knows what he's doing. Because I did a mistake and he quickly realized and he told me why, and I'm happy. Usually this person won't correct very fast, and then there will be a big pile of shit waiting for next time that I actually informally talk to the person and say, how's it going? And I say, actually, it's derailed, it's disaster, whatever. And then you dig into it and you learn. Delegation is something you need to know. If you have now a position that you are giving tasks to somebody, it's very, very important that you ask your manager and say, please, either you teach me and coach me or get me training. It's not obvious. For me, it was very difficult. And it's very important for managers to more provide context and direction than tasks, of course. Together with the culture, and I think most of the startups happening in Spain are doing it the right way. We all copy each other. We all copy like many people from the States that are getting it right, in my opinion. And this is something I've seen in many startups. The management team has a culture of trust. They trust each other. They allow for mistakes. But somehow this is not bringing forward to the team. And this is important, especially in countries like Spain, like Germany, that tend to not accept mistake. Or the mistake, period. And if the manager realizes the mistake, he will say, you did a mistake, and there's a fuck up, and next fuck up. We also. And if you want to change that, you need to, and for that are also very important, the one-on-ones, you need to change that step by step. You go to your team and say, let's all trust each other, share your mistakes. There are no hands, never ever. It's amazing. So you need to start as a manager explaining your own mistakes, so you actually need to not put yourself in as a figure of authority, but as another person, has the other different position, and needs to take different type of decision, and will fail more often than not. Or more often than he would like. Here, there is a technique here that I wanted to share. I don't know if you're doing, probably as well, which is called the 5 whys. Whenever there is a big fuck up, usually that happens in any company every couple of days, weeks if you're lucky, then we use the 5 whys, which is the manager or whoever is leading the session, ask why 5 times in a row. And then you learn a lot of things, like why for anything. For example, why were we late with the feature? Not typical management question. And if you stay there, you think people are lazy, they should work more hours. No, that's obvious management answer. And then normally, if you have somebody that is a CEO or a CEO, he comes over and says, and by the way, on Thursday when I was through the office at 7:30, there were not so many people there, so maybe it's because of that. Normally, it's also not the case. So you start asking and say, why was the feature late? Yeah, actually, we couldn't test it properly. Okay, why couldn't you test it properly? Yeah, because QA team was not reacting. Okay, you go to QA team, why were you not reacting? No, we were ready. We were ready, but the thing is they told us other priority. Okay, which other priority? That one. Why were you told that other priority? Because actually I had not checked with that. Okay, well, and if you would have been told the right priority, would you have the feature in time? No. Why? Because the stadium was broken. Okay, and you don't have the session with like 5 whys, you don't blame anybody, you just write it down. And then you start going through all of them and say, what can we do? So what can we do with the stadium? Probably. What can we do with our priorities? Who can communicate what? For us, we learn a lot of fun stuff. No? We have scrum cycles of 2 weeks. Everybody works very hard. So you have 10 days in the sprint, and working days, day 8, 9, sometimes 10. Engineering finishes and ships everything to QA. And then QA says like, yeah, thank you very much, it's not going to happen. And then the sprint is late, and when you go there, from management is very bad. No? The honest of the sprint, 25%. But you go to the developers and they say, oh, we finished, everything is done. And you start fighting for the famous definition of done, and how to integrate care, how to do all these things. And you can only find normally if you ask why enough times, especially when something goes wrong in production, also helps a lot. So a bit on communication, that again is mostly for management. This happens all the time. So I don't know, my day is, I say something and then I say 10 times more. So I say something, everybody got it, yes, 30 people, everybody got it, yes, you know why, yes. And next day something derails. I go ask, why is this derailed? No, I'm doing according to the vision that you said of this and that. I'm like, shit. But normally it's not the people's fault. It's usually the fault of management. We are, especially us that haven't been here like forever, no, we are not wearing suits and are 50 years of experience. So the thing is, you are used to say things to your team, the people you work with every day. It changes fully the picture if you need to say things to people that you don't see every day. So you need to say way more often, in different ways, smaller messages, simpler messages, and then you never get anything back. It's management. Always management says, please bring anything. I have open door policy. Please come by. Tell me anything, any problem, and whatever. Doesn't matter how many times you say, people don't come by. Only 2-3, usually 10%. So you need to figure out alternatives like one-on-ones, for example, that help information flow down to top. And as many informal gatherings as possible. So there's another thing we do which is very famous, which is the blind lunch. Which is like blind dating, but with a co-worker. And it's voluntary, everybody can go there. And then we have an automatic system that just creates pairs. So everybody gets another person, and then we do once a week. So you two communicate, figure out which day of the week you want to go for lunch together, and just talk to each other. And this we do not only in IT, but also with other divisions. And it's amazing what you learn about marketing, sales, whatever, because my boss comes and tells me these are the goals of the company. Then I have lunch with a salesman and he tells me, by the way, I'm selling this and that. And I think like, yeah, this is not in the billing system. this is going to be, but on different levels also, no? You learn new people as well. It also helps a lot for us in Berlin because you have people meeting others. Again, for us there, usually people don't know that many, don't have that many friends. Most important thing also for managers is be very careful with promises. That was one of the things we have also learned the hard way. It's very easy to promise. It's a tendency, yeah, no worries. If we do this, in 2 sprints we will fully refactor that. Next quarter we will have 1 full sprint for innovation, refactoring, bug fixing, improving the login system, whatever. Then you enter next quarter and guess what? There are new business targets. And you are again late. And then you as a manager, when you start missing that quarter after quarter, there is one day where your team says, fuck off. if there is not going to be this innovation sprint, just don't say it. I'm okay with no innovation sprint. But just please be, and this is something that I also learned the hard way, because you usually want it, and then normally your boss, especially if it's a pro-business person, they are used to negotiate, so they compromise. They want something from you now, they see something for you later, maybe. You take it, you promise to the team, and then big disaster comes. Another very important thing I learned is to remove bottlenecks. This is in tech, and this is again in organizations. If somebody has a title that says manager, he is by default usually bottleneck, unless he's very experienced. It will always be like that. Now you have an initial team of 5 developers, you hire another 5, then they are new or more junior or don't understand the system, so you appoint one as the guy who will be the gatekeeper, code gatekeeper. So nothing goes live without this guy approving the pull request. And this, which is a very good idea in theory, it always backfires. Then you as the CTO initially say, I want to make sure that everything blah 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 gets through me. I want to make sure that I do everything myself. And this always will create like stops in the process. Every manager needs to, especially for himself, sit and say, how am I blocking the team? And again, direct question usually doesn't give you the answer. How am I blocking you? Almost never gets you an answer. In my experience, unless you have Greek people. Greek people are amazing. Sorry if I offended, it was pure coincidence. But I have a 100% success rate for that in my team. They're amazing. They're like canary for sporting travels. So I got a new idea. Okay. No, but this is really important, and the way of knowing where the bottlenecks are usually the 5 whys and are the one-on-ones. In the one-on-ones, in an environment where nobody will accuse anybody, people will escalate things to the manager that they won't do in public. And in the 5 whys, you will quickly identify where the bottleneck is. So with that, you can do it. If you have a big organization like this one, for me, it helped a lot to have an impediment board that me as VP engineer was responsible for. I was responsible that QA, with product, with operations, they would all not conflict to each other. And I had on every team, they were kind of like a scrum master or somebody acting as a scrum master, and they would solve all impediments for the team. And whichever impediment they could not solve, they would add to a Jira board. I had a Jira board, public within the company, so transparency always up front, and they would put it there. And they say, that is my understanding of the impediment. Then I would try to get the whole understanding of the impediment, because usually there will be several divisions. And then we would meet with the whole management team once a month. And I consider it my responsibility to go through that board and see which points are in the backlog, which points do we have a solution for, so they are in development. And once whoever escalated the problem set is fixed, then I move it to them, or to in review, because sometimes since we discuss until one organizational thing is over, it takes a bit more time than in tech. So that's a very important thing in technology as well. Now in technology, of course, probably you know, probably much better than me, but this is as soon as you start scaling, this is where you spend most of the time figuring out it's not the database, it's not the backend, it's actually in between. How do I generate more connections for the database? And if you don't have tools for that, then whichever tool you invest there, or whichever process of improving logging, like transactional logging through from request until database, that you can see the whole path, you can see where the time goes, everything there, of course, is super important. I can recommend New Relic for that. It's very expensive, but it's super useful. And also something we realized is eventually you need load testing. That was for me another of the bottlenecks. It was a hard investment we didn't do at the beginning. And then we ended up having a pretty nice load testing environment where we could simulate all types of loads in the server and actually tell the server where the load was hitting each of our web pages, because we have different entry channels. So it's not, you can enter several points of the happy path depending if it comes from SEO, from SEM, or from wherever. So for that we were able to simulate. We invested quite heavily in all these type of tools, which is the cool thing of having many teams, because once you have 5 people, you cannot invest on those things. With 10 people, even not. But once you have big teams, you can have people working on all these nice side tools. Again, very important, once you get to certain scale, the system architecture gets more and more critical, and actually getting agreement on the system architecture is super tricky. So with microservices, not microservices, how many microservices, where do we put the fucking microservices, how do they talk to each other, how do they discover each other, how do they version their own APIs, do we want to have external API versioning, yes, internal API versioning, and all this. Do we do APIs the way that are RESTful, or the way the backend wants an API, or do it the way that the iOS developer says the API should be, and we just bundle crap all together and serve. And so all these things are super important in being able to develop fast and having a good system. There is no silver bullet, of course. It's just there needs to be from management structures to discuss that. We have an architecture guild, so it helps us get people that have curiosity and wanted to talk to each other. It's very good to have also in the evening sometimes like architecture guild. You pay some pizzas and you get the iOS guy to talk to the chief architect or whichever similar figure you have, backend staff or developer, whatever, within a pizza you could agree on why he wants the API that way. On a formal meeting between 2 teams, it's not going to happen. So in my experience, never ever. So you have 2 people and they immediately escalate, we have an obstacle, we don't agree on the API. So now we invent an API gatekeeper, and then you have the problem all over the place, because then mobile is late in the deadline because the API, blah, blah, blah. And so you need to invest significantly in all this structure. That's my professor who already knows probably very well. But as a team, it's very important that you try to get in all these discussions, understand why the system architecture is the way it is. How do I create a communication channel with somebody I hate or with somebody who is by definition stupid. So if your front end is back end, if your back end is front end. And how are we going to discuss some principles in a way that we might even eventually agree on something. Same with code reviews. How many comments do you accept per code review? How deep should the comment be? How big is a pull request? How much time between the pull request is there and then it gets merged? Do you want the pull request to be commented by whoever feels like it in the company, by one other person in the team, by at least 3 other people? Probably depends on the pull request. And in my experience, if you don't have some kind of policy, it ends up being tricky, no? Because most of the people say, yeah, sure, whoever comments on my pull request is fine, no? But it's a hot pull request, and then one team spends the whole week just commenting on the pull request, and 2 other teams as well. Probably some of them are from the idiot perspective, and then it will just create the biggest disaster ever. This is my favorite slide. I put it in as many presentations as I can, and I really like it, and it helps. It's something that illustrates very well the concept. I mean, if you want to have good managers that come from tech, if you want to have very senior people, if you want to have good discussions on architecture, if you want to have people being promoted, everybody starts somewhere, and there also needs to be a plan, and everybody is responsible for understanding what that plan is. How can I grow within the company? Formally and also informally. So not only how do I get the promotion, or how do I get more salary, or how do I get whatever benefit you get, is how do I get to learn more? Am I allowed to read? Am I expected to read at home? Does the company give you books to read on the weekend? So for example, the last thing my team did there in Delivery Hero was to give each other as a present, the company present in Christmas, a book. And the book was actually chosen by the peers, so they spent a lot of time thinking what would be the best book for everyone, for each person. Every person got a different book. We have the Architecture Guild. We did what we call Chapter Fridays, where everybody who was working on the same tech, in the same part of the tech stack, would join on Fridays and just hack on something together or share knowledge together. Since when you have vertical teams, very quickly you lose the connection. So you have maybe in every team 2-3 backend guys and maybe 2-3 frontend guys, but they don't talk to other frontend guys and they don't talk to the backend guys, and very quickly you diverge. So people would have ability to have workshops, to teach things to each other and so on. Also very important to bring external training when needed, normally on management skills, at least in my experience, or new practices. If you decide you will do TDD, maybe there are 3, 4, 5 people who did TDD in their former company, so they can help. But usually somebody external also helps a bit because he has some experience on how to coach on that topic. So if you want to change and do TDD, usually helps to bring all this knowledge, have a plan. And to finalize, if everything seems under control, you're not going fast enough. That I tell my teams every time I can, because engineers want to have everything under control. It's nature. It's the nature of the system. You don't want to be called at 2 a.m. You don't want to come back on a Monday and say, where were we? But this is business, and this will always be like that. And if you are a successful startup, this should be your feeling, day to day, that things change. Things change faster than you would like. And there are many things that not even the CEO, definitely not the CTO, can do anything about. So things like an M&A. So your company decides it's strategically interesting to buy a similar company. And then you need to integrate teams, or you need to integrate software. Or your company decides they launch a country, and yeah, they know that launching a country takes 2 months, but there is a new important necessity because another competitor, they got that they are going to go, so you need to go a bit earlier, and you need to push. Or it could be an overnight deal that you got, the marketing team got a super good deal on TV that normally would not be possible. Now you can be on Quattro and Sexta for half the price. So actually you want to do it. And for that you need to, whatever, probably scale part of the platform, whatever the landing page would be, create the landing page and go a bit around the circle. So there is a new competitor, or there is a new funding run, or it's the end of the funding run and all these things change. And this is important, and for that there are very good one-on-ones. Just ask why, but expect also that you will get always derailed. So once you think, finally we have the right process, we do right onboarding, we have the right people, we have the right team structure, then you do M&A. And then you find a new company, and then you start all over from scratch again. So that was it from my side. I hope you learned maybe a trick or two, or at least heard the same story from a different voice. And I'm open for questions now.
I have two questions. One, how long have you had spies in our team? Because everything you say, even the names, like the architecture guild, the Greek, the architecture team, everything.
It's very similar. We copy each other very often on the high level. So we actually meet and copy each other and discuss. Many of these techniques come from Spotify. That was one of the biggest companies in Europe, inventing them, setting them up. They have a fantastic paper on how to build all this structure. I copy from them. So completely.
We also have a couple of Spotify guys that we hired.
Exactly. And probably they know very well how that system works. Then also by talking to each other, in the end you end up figuring out what ideas are good, and if you have an agile mindset and you try them out, you end up sticking with whatever works. Second?
And my second question, which is a real question, about recruiting. How fast were you hired? Because we more than tripled our team in the last year, and that long process, the process of bringing somebody in and taking them for the whole day or for the whole week, kind of having an interview process that takes that long, even if you don't know where that guy is going to go to. I wonder if we could do it.
So I did one thing differently. I didn't hire people, I didn't know where they were going to go. So I first invented the teams, the responsibilities, and from there I built them up. So sometimes the whole team was new, so they will not cross-check each other, that's true. But usually I knew where I wanted people, because also like the skill set is a bit different. And also as a CTO, you need to make sure that you force the rest of your partners, usually product, to stick with a concept, no? Because CEO will get money, product will say I need 1 trillion features, and there is the risk of spawning too many things. We did it, and it's very complex then to handle all the team dynamics, because it's not just growing. I mean, just bringing more people will solve the problem faster. No, we all know, and 9 women don't get a baby in a month. But even long term, you need to make sure they work well with each other. So you need to, and I always try to also have personalities that cross-check each other a bit. So when I build a team, it's a bit of artisanal, it's a bit of handcraft thing. I tried that there are a bit of people with energy, like optimistic people, let's hit the wall. There are a bit of people that are a bit slower, like let's double check everything. You have people from different, at least from nationalities and so on. So I try to always build a team as a concept. We grew the same, so we grew from 15 to 50 almost in 1 year as well. And it gets a bit painful.
Yeah, sounds familiar.
But for me, the recruiting process is very important, because otherwise you end up doing the 15, 50, 30. Where you hire a lot of people and then you need to let go many people. And this is also not fun, it's very bad for the team morale. So I had that a couple of times when I need to do M&A. And you would acquire a team and you realize that team is not good. And you need to let go like 20%, 50%. And that creates a lot of bad energy when the people remaining, and for their own team it's actually bad, and so on. So for me it's more important to not grow a team than to hire wrong. It depends. Some of the companies are very good and hire and in 1 month taking a decision. So also if you go very fast hire, what you can do is to hire, and then the first month make a decision. And then you need to be strong and say, we assume we will let go 30% of the people in the first month. And actually, to be honest, you should even discuss that with the candidates. You know, companies that do that. They hire somebody and they say, look, there is 30% chance you don't stay here after 1 month. And this is important. In Germany, it's possible and it's okay, because people change jobs and it's not a problem. In Spain, it's a bit more difficult, or was from the rumors when I was here, because if somebody let go of a job, sometimes it's difficult to land a new one. I don't know, it used to be a couple of years ago. So you need to be honest with the person and say, what is the risk of you joining this, and what's the whole process look like? For us, it's 6 months trial period, so we can always let somebody go in the first 6 months. Yeah. But we don't have such a high chance.
Thanks. So I have completely different kind of question. I'm a bookworm, and I'd like to know, is there any book you read recently or read in your life that you would say, that was a piece of damn good book, I totally recommend it to someone?
On which context?
On whatever context you think it's worth.
Whichever context.
I'm not asking that, oh, this book changed my life completely. No, something that you say, oh, this is super interesting, I totally recommend.
Then I would recommend probably the Toyota way.
The Toyota way? Okay.
So this is a study in the Toyota practices, and everything we know and we do in the industry, we have copied from Toyota. So the word Scrum comes from Toyota, the word Lean comes from Toyota, the word Waste comes from Toyota, Kanban comes from Toyota, and you understand why, and you understand this book is about the principles below. And I think in the industry, especially in IT, there is a tendency of doing the frameworks. In my experience, almost always wrong. So people do Scrum, but what they do is not Scrum. Scrum says place trust in the team. And they say, so we do Scrum so we can control the engineers better. And you're like, you're wrong already. And the Toyota way explains most of these things. And actually, so things that I copied from that book, there is something called, Spanish from Japanese name, Genji Genbutsu, for example, that says, go and see for yourself. No? There's a tip for managers. Don't trust in production, no, in Toyota. Don't trust what the Excel sheet, what the reports say. Just go to production. Listen to the conversations, see how the cars are coming, and you will know the problems. And it's the same for managers, and it's the same, I actually tell people even in, so the company we're building now is logistics on food delivery, so I tell people, just get a car and drive. See. So engineers, when they say, yeah, the app is actually working, I don't understand why this bug is coming. They say, take the phone, do deliveries one night, and you will see it. And then once you do that, then, and this is stuff I learned mostly through that book.
Okay, awesome, thanks.
I've been called many things, but never canary, so thanks for that one.
It's a Greek.
I'm sorry. It was a very deep generalization.
It's true, yeah. Sorry, the question is, how do teams form? Do they form organically, or do you always form them yourself or whoever is in charge?
The teams?
The teams, yeah. Are they,
yes.
Because you said they need to be cohesive and autonomous, so is it an organic, so they just people decide we can work well together, or do you actually go and handpick each one of them and say?
I usually handpick. I know companies that do the organic one. So there is some company, what is the beautiful presentation thing? Prezi. So Prezi, they also have Python stack, very agile company from, I think, Budapest. And they do that. So the way they work is very interesting. They do variation. And every 6 months, they put new business targets, new features, new products, and they rebuild all the teams in a semi-organic fashion. For us, it was very difficult to do that. So usually I would sit together with product owners and with some people that were like the leads of engineers, and we would decide how could the team look like. And then I would talk to all the members of the team and discuss, do you see yourself in this team, like tasks-wise and also people-wise? And if somebody would have an issue, then we would try to accommodate.
Thank you.
Hi. Hello. How do you keep the balance between team's autonomy and the company's overall strategy? For instance, when different things that need to be assured, like deciding which programming languages are used, or any other kind of things that you need to balance?
Yeah, that's a very good question, since that's one of the trade-offs. The way every company is a bit different there, and I've seen many successful examples, also many things going wrong. So it depends. It depends a lot on how your challenges look like. If your products are very far apart, for example, and different technologies, it's not a problem. If everybody is having the same technology, it's a big advantage because you can deploy it, and so everybody knows the stack. You can move people in between teams. So you need to, as a company, decide, and that's a management decision, where the freedom is. So also it's the same as how much freedom, for example, a product manager has. Can the product manager decide spontaneously on everything that relates to their product? Or is it going to come 100% through the CEO, which happens in many companies? Or is it going to be together? And does this decision involve the technical guy, whoever is an architect or a CTO or whoever, in deciding which features and why not? So in the end, the framework needs to be decided. So there is no one rule. But it's important it's decided and public and known. So for example, in Delivery Hero, people cannot choose technology. So technology is what it is. And only 2-3 people get to decide, and what we do is once a year we meet and we evaluate our technology stack and we decide what it is. And then the teams need to use it. And if a team needs something different for whatever reason, then they can propose. And only if it's a big gap that we would allow. Now, if somebody can say, better than MySQL is PostgreSQL, then, and if somebody comes and says, actually we need PostGIS, okay, then that's a valid decision for going maybe with Postgres, as an example.
Okay, I have 3 questions.
Wow.
I probably could have more, but yeah. One is, you have almost not talked about remote teams.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to have my remote team here for 6 months, but then they left. But I also have some people who is remote, and I was wondering how do you manage to
For me, it's very
keep the
difficult.
trust and
For me, it's very difficult. I try to avoid remote as much as possible. So I managed to persuade people living here. Like I said, we have a QA team in Belarus, working for very, very little money. And I managed to persuade the whole management team that it was better to bring them all to Berlin, fight the visas, and get them to Berlin in salaries, which would mean the team would cost 10 times more because of the advantage. And we could not have them work remotely. There are, so I'm not the best person to answer the question because I haven't seen many successes there. I know people doing it in Firefox, in Ubuntu, and in a couple of other companies. In GitHub, they also do it. So I have heard from some people, and I know the lessons, but for me, they are difficult to implement. I think probably the hiring process needs to be tied to the fact that people would work remotely. So you need to hire somebody that is able to work. For example, a freelancer is usually very able to work remotely. So in my current team, I have 2 people working remotely only. And they work quite well because I knew them from before, so I had already the trust, and they have been freelancing before, so they are very used to do time tracking, to measure themselves, to have a discipline. So if you have disciplined people that know how to communicate remotely, maybe, but it's very, very tricky. More questions?
yeah. Another thing we are discussing in our company is which tool we should be using when we are talking about different platforms. For example, for me, I'm using Trello to with our app team, backend team, front-end team, and platform team. But we are not really sure that this is the best tool. I don't know which one did you.
Unfortunately, I always end up in Jira. And I say unfortunately because everybody regrets Jira. So with my newest team, I did an experiment. I said, we will use the tool that you choose. And everybody said, everything except Jira. I said, you choose the tool, I don't care. And then we started working with Post-its in the wall. Post-its in the walls are usually the best tool. Then we moved to Trello. But Trello, everybody started, when the team said, we don't want the Post-its, we want something that is online. Okay, Trello it is, they choose. So we start with Trello, but then you get these huge columns that you cannot even see anything or track anything because it's very beautiful but too big. And then eventually somebody in the team said, why don't we move to Jira? And they asked me, and I said, I won't enter the trap, it's not my decision, it's your decision. If you want to move to Jira, feel free, I have no problem, I will just go on mine. And in the end they moved to Jira. So I have even proven that if you let the team, they might even choose Jira. In my opinion, Jira is the one that is more full-featured and easier to use, but it's a pain in the ass. And you need to have somebody that knows how to administer it and how to create the right workflows and so on. I haven't seen any other tool that is better. I use Jira, I use Trello, I use Post-its, but with remote teams they don't work very well. If you want to.
Okay, and my last question is, how do you manage business decisions with technical decisions? Like, for example, I have a lot of pressure on some business decisions that doesn't affect really how the feature should work. And then architecture team
Yes.
is like, But this doesn't affect how the feature works. It shouldn't go to the database and blah blah blah. So how should I manage that?
I have tried a couple of tricks that work very well for me. One is to try to link the teams, usually the tech people, to the business as much as I can. So usually I go myself as the CTO and always explain why the goals, why the business things, and everything. And I try to give the sense of urgency of the business, no? Like, why is this feature important? Why is this feature important in the next month? Ideally, what you would like is to convince the architecture team, or at least one person in the architecture team. It's almost impossible to convince a whole team. And the way I do it is to go with the business problem. As much as possible to go with the business problem, not have the decision just on the product level, because it's very tough. Because also then you have the poles in the discussion, no? So you put yourself as the business person, and then immediately the tech person will defend and try to reduce technical debt, which is a natural thing. So I try to cross-pollinize, no? To say, okay, what would you here in my position do as a technical lead here? And do you really, and then you discover people sometimes, or very often teams, don't really understand the business part. You discover they don't understand why a feature was important. And then you need to go and explain better. And I've done things as bringing the CEO and explain with a whole Excel sheet and the budget, and explain to the teams why the budget is built the way it is, why launching a new country is important, why this is important. And I combine that, explaining the business, to having people, but in this case it's a bit tricky. In our case, I was having people using the product as much as possible. Here is probably a bad policy if they use Jobandtalent a lot. But if you can use the product, then it's actually very helpful because you see the pain. But even if they fake the whole interaction, and people, for example, we had a big discussion on our newest mobile app where I'm working now, because there was some business thing we wanted to add, and the guys were like, yeah, they need to refactor the app and what not. So I sent them to Drive and I sent them to Deliver, and they came with that feature and another 5. Like, this is super urgent. I don't know how you didn't even realize. I went and was like, look, this is in the backlog. But it's down in the backlog, and yes, but we need to focus on this immediately now. So this migration between one database and the other database, maybe we can do a third, and then we do the other 2 thirds, and they were coming with that into the backlog. So for that, important is to have them as much as possible on the business. If they understand, the cool thing about tech people is they are like engineers. So they are people that think a lot, very, very, very analytical. And a business decision is an analytical decision. The only thing is you need to bring everybody in the engineering team to understand how the business decision gets made, and then they very quickly will do the same. Even the product decision in theory is an analytical decision, no? It's like a resource trade-off in a way. And then while having the conversations also, probably you get to understand better why this architecture part was important and not. It's very difficult usually. You need to have tech people that do craft a lot. Which refactoring should be done, which migration should be done, and so on.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. First one is that you mentioned that you use a lot of information from Spotify in order to build all the teams and everything. One of the things that Spotify tries to do is to create temporary teams. So you work for a team, it's for a feature. When that feature is done, you split the team and reorganize people. But you Spotify exactly the opposite. That is trying to keep the team always set up and then move the team to different features. And I wonder why.
It's a good question. We did only one experiment with one of these rearrangements. For us, the problem was we were changing very fast, and people have not been in the company for a long time. No? I think this is a good idea if people know each other already. For us, it took 3 to 6 months until people were efficient, collaborating together and trust each other. So if I would change them every 3 months, it would be tricky. Probably now it could be done because they know each other better. But at the moment we had difficulties. Also, language barriers were a problem for us because, like I said, almost for nobody was English. Common language. We have very different levels. We had a tricky legacy system, so we were very rarely building new things. We almost always interact with the legacy system, so there was some advantages in knowing your part. But I think now, especially for new products, or once you have enough services that you can work, which is at the point where we are now, not where we were back then, we have like a monolith. So even architecture-wise, we could not allow teams to be very independent in that sense. But it's something I would really like to try. I think it makes sense.
Cool. And the second question is, if you have a bunch of independent teams that are autonomous, how do you keep them in sync? Because for a lot of time they need to keep in sync because maybe they need to go into the same release train and they need to work in the same priority or things like that. How do you keep that working together?
With the business alignment, so usually the product people would align, and then there was some kind of understanding and definition on the different parts. And then if the project was very complex, like many teams, it almost always involves also marketing and sales teams. So we usually had some classic project management on top of that. So we had like agile teams, each kind of autonomous, but then one big project, let's say 3-man big project that needs to interact. For example, rebranding. So we need to rebrand everything, which is a very interdependent project, no? Because all apps need to be rebranded, published on the same day, so you need to make sure that the iOS app is done with a couple of days in advance so you can launch. Marketing will want to do a TV campaign, so you need to be aligned through quite complex teams and tricky schedules and so on. So we would use classic project management on top, or otherwise Scrum of Scrums for engineers. Chapter Fridays, so we use the chapter structure that Spotify had, and then on Fridays they would share how they are doing. And it would be informal, but in a way they would align. And then product alignment meetings, where all product owners would go sit together and make sure that they were all in sync with each other.
For the product management part, it's like you have a product manager in top of the teams, then the teams have their own project owner, something like that, working with the team. And how is that they are pushing from the project management that is just coordinating everybody into the backlog? Is that handing the task to the product owner, saying, hey, your team is going to do this, it's top priority now, or is it just pushing the stuff in, okay, do it when you have time? How do you do that?
We used to have a combination. So usually product owners are the ones that put the stuff on the backlog. But there were like, so from a company perspective, we would meet beginning of the quarter, and then we would set up a quarterly goals. At the time, now it's this OKR thing that Google and others do. If you don't do OKR, maybe you want to read into that, objective key results. And with that, we would align the company. And from there, then, the features would come from the product owners. So I'd say, to meet this goal, I will need this and those features. That actually depend on those and those other things from other teams. It would be aligned. And then they are responsible for feature definition, putting in the backlog, delivering, and so on.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the same question, but not the same. You have talked at the end of the presentation about autonomous teams. Well, the question is, if I work in some products, like, I don't know, in my case, suggestions, I don't know, product, at the end of the day, you have the focus on a lot of things. You have not one boss. You have multiple bosses, and you receive a lot of emails, issues, and you lose the control, and you lose the feeling of you work only for one thing. You are on one team working on and pushing that. Well, how do you control this, the kind of feeling from a developer?
So on one side, we will not have somebody working in different things that were not in their teams. So we made the teams cohesive, and if there is a topic, a team could have many topics. So maybe you have suggestion, and then you have analytics, and then you have something else. But then those go to the team. Because if you have a developer, quite often you want to have QA involved, and quite often you want to have product involved. And then if you cross-reference through all the teams, it's not going to happen, especially on any kind of rhythm. So we said, okay, this topic goes to that product owner, to that product team, to that feature team. And he will do almost everything which is related to that. So on that side, everything stayed on the team, no? So, because then who is going to do the code review and so on, so that way it was quite clear. And then there is the other mix, which is emails and questions and delivering. We channel everything, so at some point I forbid everybody to write to developers. So in our company, you either wrote to QA and formally bugs at deliveryhero.com, and you could send a bug report, or you would write to the product owner. And the role of the product owner was to buffer. To buffer emails, because in my experience, if you develop, answering emails doesn't go very well. There is a certain number of emails that you're involved, especially in terms of architecture discussions and things like that. But if you have the CEO on your ass asking why this and why that, and everybody comes with random questions, and with enough people, then you have developers just answering emails, and they can't really. So in your case, it will be different, but in our case, it's like, yeah, from customer care. No, this order got lost. Why? It's like, okay, one order got lost out of 10,000 today. Should I investigate it? Probably not. And then it goes to either QA or goes to product, and then immediately, once it reaches a product person, immediately you discover, because they know how to manage that better than engineers normally, so immediately they decide on a quota. They say, okay, 10% of the time will be for that. Or like we end up saying, if there's an error that is less than 0.1% of orders, we don't investigate. Tough luck, those happen. And things like that. But you need to figure out a way. I mean, in our case, it's different. This goes against other principles, like the famous UL 12 principles or 10 principles. But in our case, we had huge legacy code, and stuff was failing every day. So why? If it's not big, let's not go and fix. Let's just, again, business trade-off, business decision. How much do you invest in bug fixing versus, in our company, people don't talk to developers unless for explaining the feature. That's the moment where usually in companies people don't talk to developers because they talk to the product owner does a spec, somebody implements the spec not fully understanding. So what I try is to actually bridge it back and then bring the product and the engineer who's going to implement, and probably the QA with whoever is the stakeholder, have them all sitting together, have the stakeholder explaining the feature to everybody, because then QA person will ask the tricky questions, so how am I going to test this? And the engineer will actually bring like, actually that's almost always also a quick estimate, like, yeah, that's common. Wow, no, this is huge. Yeah, it seems very simple to you, but this is huge. Or actually, this is very quick. I can do tonight, no more. So we try to mix in that moment, but not for the emails and follow-up.
Thank you so much.
Last question, or should we move on to buy and pizza?
we have pizza, a lot of pizza, and I don't know if someone has more question.
Otherwise, feel free to. I will stay here a bit, and then feel free to approach me or anything. Also, you have my Twitter, and Sergio has my email. If you have some other further questions, I'm happy to share whatever I know.
Thank you a lot, Samuel.